Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to an MHA webinar where the subject matter is reducing the carbon in construction. My name is Brendan Sharkey and I head up the construction and real estate sector for MHA. Carbon reduction is one of the most significant issues the construction industry now faces. We thought it'd be a good idea to assess how our clients and the industry generally is dealing with this challenge. Today I'm joined by Nicola Scott and Sam Collett from Briggs & Forrester Engineering Limited, Steve Jewell from Swiss Distribution Limited, and Ewan Cross from Rolton Group. And we also have our very own Rich Hall, who is Head of Sustainability and Stakeholder Assurance. I'll let each member of the panel just introduce themselves a little bit more, give a bit more background. Nicola.
I'm Nicola Scott. Again, I work for Briggs & Forrester Engineering Services. I'm the National Pre-Construction Strategic Manager and I support our regional pre-construction teams and manage opportunities, including national framework opportunities.
I'm Sam Collett, also at Briggs & Forrester. I lead our sustainability and building physics team.
I'm Stephen Jewell of Swiss Distribution, a supplier of spray foam insulation.
I'm Ewan Cross. I'm with Rolton Group, so I work in Rolton Group's strategic energy team, providing strategic energy and carbon advice to our clients.
Rich?
Yeah, Rich Hall, Head of Sustainability and Stakeholder Assurance at MHA. I've been involved in sustainability for 20 years.
What I should say, on your screen at the bottom there is a question and answer session. If you've got any questions you want to put to the panel and we've got the sufficient time, please put those questions through to us and we'll try and deal with them as we can. The idea of today is really to have a panel discussion discussing what is happening in terms of low carbon in the construction industry. And we've got a series of questions we're going to debate between ourselves and hopefully give you an insight as to what people are doing or attempting to do and how they see the future. So the first question I have is, what are you doing to make construction low carbon? Ewan, would you like to say a few words on that from your point of view?
Yeah, thanks, Brendan. Yeah, so I mean, I'll start by sort of qualifying. I'm not, maybe my work in energy and carbon is maybe not directly in the construction sector, but what we do sort of in terms of our energy and carbon strategy is we get involved quite early in projects. So often what that means is helping our clients to actually understand what sort of these emerging concepts like net zero carbon, low carbon, what that actually means in reality to the projects that they're undertaking. And we help them to set sort of the energy and carbon strategy that they can sort of run throughout their project to make sure that they're managing their carbon and mitigating and reducing as necessary.
I mean, Sam, Nicola, you actually got ahead with the EV points and the power points. I know there's more sort of funding coming that way, but you're quite proud of that, what you've done there. Yeah,
definitely something we're proud of as a business. Obviously there's two aspects and points to the reduction of the carbon, and that will come from an office location and the project location. So our EV points, we've completely rolled out a full green fleet for our business. The options are hybrid or electric with a view to imminently go to full electric offering. And as we say, we've got EV points at our head office with a view to roll that out across the whole of the regional offices as well. So yeah, transport was one of our largest energy consumptions as a business from a latest energy audit as a business as a whole. So we knew that it was a focus for us to reduce with 11 regional offices, and that's something we have to focus on in terms of transport. In addition, procurement strategy has been our other focus, looking at how we are engaging with our suppliers, engaging with them and talking about waste reduction and such items like that, and prefabrication as well.
Steve?
Yeah, for us at Swiss, what we've been doing is, supplying a product, an insulation product that actually lasts the lifetime of a building instead of replacing or retrofit. So, that's the key thing for us, is supplying the nation with a product that can be what lasts the lifetime of the building.
Rich, is anything on your thoughts on?
Yeah, I think it's it's interesting that the guys are looking at their operational footprint as well as what's going into the buildings as well. And we've seen with the sort of new net carbon zero strategy, particularly a focus on some of the materials and the business insulation and things like that being given quite high billing within that. So that's going to be important as well. But I think also when you're, helping clients reduce carbon, it's very important that you seem to be doing it yourselves as well and sort of start from the cultural change within your own organisation.
Generically, has anybody got, you've got your short term, you've got into either any other short term measures that construction industry is actually getting its hands on at the moment, or is anybody getting their heads around sort of immediacy, anything there?
I think the most immediate thing is the decarbonisation of the grid. So moves to most of our designs now are all pushing towards all electric, which is reflected with Morris yesterday, looking to outlaw gas boilers. So yeah, we would always try and avoid gas now wherever we can on projects and always go all electric.
Will they still put gas boilers in? I mean, you've sort of made it. We talked earlier about, diesel cars were good at one stage. No, you should have a diesel car. I mean, who wants a house with a gas boiler now?
Yeah, certainly commercially, we deal more on our side of business with commercial. It's definitely moving that way. And then we come on to some of the challenges, but the fact that the legislation hasn't then caught up with that, so we're still using carbon factors for our carbon compliance from 2016. So the legislation isn't keeping pace with the actual decarbonisation of the grid, which causes us some issues.
Yeah. Steve, any thoughts? Short term?
For us, and what we're doing is making sure that the contractors that use our materials are also looking at their footprint with, how do they get to the job site? What energy are they using within their own building? It's easy to look out sometimes, but sometimes it takes, to sit down and say, look, we're doing energy saving measures to people's properties throughout the UK. But what have you actually done, inside the business? That's the main thing for us, to sit down and making sure everyone's looking internally before.
How do you manage to do that? I mean, how do you frighten people? I mean, do you use
that's the reason for the look, right? No. We do a lot of webinars ourselves with our network, a lot of updates. Our main supplier is owned by Kingsman, so we have a lot of meetings with them and look at the campaigns that they're putting out. Some of the campaigns that they've got are really forward thinking. Planet Passionate is one of them. Recycled plastics from the ocean being used in their products. So that sort of mindset all the time, and looking at how we again go back to looking internally, but speaking with the suppliers who supply us and then rolling it out to our network.
Yeah, have you seen anything, maybe not so much in the construction, but other areas where it's been taken on board and people?
Well, I think it's quite interesting to come back to the comment you said about will we outlaw the gas boilers, and I think it's kind of do we use a stick or do we use a carrot? And I think outlawing the gas boiler is obviously the stick, but some of the work that obviously you're doing with the insulation, which is getting buildings to the point where actually the gas boiler is not the best solution. We've now got air source heat pumps that are much more efficient, buildings that are much more efficient, and actually maybe it'll become an easy choice to move away from the gas boiler and into something much more efficient, something running on the electricity network, which obviously you mentioned decarbonising all the time. I think 2035 we're due to have a fully decarbonised grid.
I think sometimes with it as well, it's the education, right? That everybody thinks properties need to breathe, the air tightness, and then you can use different ways of supplying them. And again, gas obviously not being going to be outlawed in the future. And I think if we can look at how we can insulate first of all and then work backwards, I think that is a really key part to doing it. But again, it rolls out to that education. People need to understand how that they can do it and what's available. It's one thing knowing it's you've heard about an energy saving measure, but how do you source it? We need to
so we had those adverts, smoking damages your health, or government health warnings. Are you saying the government should be doing more to actually put that into the marketplace and get better understanding for education?
Yeah, I think it's more managing where it goes out to. understanding, you know, what is the consumer that needs to know where they can source the measures from.
Yeah.
It's all well and good. Us sat around this table know exactly where we can go, but you know,
the man in the street.
Yeah,
the man in the street. Where does he go? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You know,
Yeah.
so some more marketing for where you can find the energy saving measures, and some of the processes to get these measures under the government schemes as well.
Yes.
They're a minefield.
Yes.
You know, again, you need a degree to get, you know, free loft insulation. So it kind of, then everyone goes,
died, didn't it?
Yeah, it really does. I 100% love the schemes that they put out. I think they're great. I think somebody needs to sit down and go, right, let's make this as simple as, you know, as simple as putting the insulation in. And you know, that's just my thoughts on it.
When I talk about sort of office buildings and whatever, you know, there is pressure now to be sustainable, to be, you know, carbon whatever reduction, because people do not want to own, you know, commercial buildings that don't have a life expectancy of whatever to get, you know, because the market will just dry up. So I can see in the commercial market, you know, moves afoot to say, I must have the up-to-date spec, whatever, that meets that. The people that go and occupy it will want to know that you've got, you know, a carbon policy, or you've reduced it, you know, it's sustainable and whatever. Maybe in the housing market and whatever, it's not so easy to see that push, is it, at the moment? You know, I don't know what you think on that, Rich.
I think it's an interesting one. I mean, what sort of happens today is in the commercial sector is that, you know, at an architecture level, people expect the highest rating, and then what sort of happens is when you get through commissioning and costs start to escalate a little bit, some of the measures get taken out before they're put in. I think you're right. I think with major organisations looking at net carbon zero, and you know, we'll have to see what the balance of work in an office looks like.
Yeah.
Office is going to be at a premium, and people will certainly be asking those questions and sticking with those investments. I think that the housing, you know, the legislation that's coming in, the zero carbon homes and things like that, will start to sort of force houses going in that
The
way.
new ones.
The new ones that are coming through. And so for Scotland, that's 2024. They're already building houses to a slightly higher standard than the UK. And then it's, I guess, one of the real key questions at the moment, again, the fluctuating sort of energy prices, particularly around gas, might change perception, but what is the consumer perception in terms of, are they buying houses currently because they're more energy efficient and more sustainable?
I can't get those questions. Go on, carry on. Sorry, that was me playing with the computer.
So I think there's a piece. Yeah, I think there's definitely a piece around the consumer perception, and actually, you know, back to Steve's point, irrespective of who's building it, there's a cultural shift that perhaps government can influence in terms of educating, you know, buyers. What's the long term? We're moving away from an initial cost model to what's the long term ownership model, and people need to understand.
And there's a cost as well, unfortunately.
There is.
Everyone's going to be facing a cost here. That's the reality, isn't it? Yeah. So, can we get to, was it carbon zero by 2050? I mean, is that just a pipe dream, or is it a serious thing that can happen in the marketplace? I think it needs to be promoted.
I think it's going to be difficult.
Yeah.
Nobody wanted to be the first one to say that, right?
I think operational carbon, potentially, but I think if you include embodied carbon, the actual carbon, like we were discussing earlier, associated, like putting a huge amount of concrete and steel into making a building without just offsetting it, I think is a real challenge.
So,
I think one of the big problems, and you're absolutely right, the operational carbon is certainly the easier of the two. The embodied carbon, the nature, the sort of global nature of supply chains now. We're just working on a project, and when you look at where the raw materials required for a big project come from, it's going to be quite difficult, because you're going to need the transparency and the traceability, the ability to know that yes, you're taking material from the other side of the world, but that it is being produced sustainably, and that therefore you can translate that through into what happens in the building in the UK. We can't look at it sort of from the UK point of view and just say, it's okay, we'll look after ourselves. It doesn't work like that anymore. We're almost at the mercy of the global sort of supply chains and the ability to decarbonise all the way through. So I think, yeah, it's a global effort that will help the UK achieve its goals.
There's a massive development on the materials now, isn't there? You know, the actual materials that are now coming into construction, you know, that can be used. So, you know, that possibly will help in the future. And you know, I was reading about the reduction in carbon in concrete. You know, that people are making efforts to actually, you know, try and reduce it, but maybe not eliminate it, which is where you're.
I think that's probably, it's an inherently carbon-intensive process.
Yeah.
Generating these materials.
Yeah. So we don't think we're going to achieve it. Then is a summary.
I think it's having been around it for long enough, I have to be optimistic.
So it's your job to make it.
Yeah, it's my job to make it happen. It's solely my job. But yeah, I think, you know, we've seen enormous efforts to decarbonate the grid, which has been, you know, successful from a UK perspective. I think we know that there are certain industries that are more challenging, and that's why when other industries are effectively being asked to do a bit more, you know, so when we might not get to true net carbon if we, you know, draw a boundary around construction without offsetting a fair bit of it. But that's why when other people are being asked to set science-based targets, net zero, they're effectively being asked to do not just your own, but do something for these other industries as well.
Sure, yeah.
So, you know, obviously the big question is whether there'll be a get out of jail card on technology, but construction is going to have to do some form of offsetting to get to net carbon zero at the same time that everybody else is trying to do offsetting, and we're expecting, you know, the price of offsets to go up tenfold in the next 10 years because that's, you know, people are trying to get on board and get this done.
So that'd be another cost in the construction model.
It's another cost in the construction
that will
model
need to be taken into account.
Absolutely, but I think again we're going to see something on carbon pricing again. So the EU, the UK ETS, which is mainly aimed, other than aviation and maritime, it's mainly aimed at big source, so single point emitters or big factories, for instance. There's a lot of talk in the net carbon zero about having to look at the level of the cap, what the cost of carbon is. So we potentially expect to see something on the climate change levy go up as well. So we're gonna have to be mindful that I think there'll be the incentives, but there'll also be the stick around potentially increasing carbon taxation, which they'll then use to try and drive the innovation.
So getting into the contractors market, the construction industry, what are you doing? Are you getting pressure on your supply chain to consider carbon sustainability, you know, carbon reduction? Is that, I can see somebody put government contracts, I think they're starting to pull that in. Yeah, what have you done in your supply chain? And how are you ensuring that works when you come to the bid or whatever?
In terms of public body works, yeah, you're right, we do have more of a concentration and an effort into, it's client driven in terms of things that we have to do, local supply chain, local labour, all to do with the transport reduction and the carbon emissions that will go into that project. We manage that obviously through our procurement teams, and it's been a massive education shift. We've had to change people's behaviours in terms of how they recruit, so in terms of less of a monetary focus but more of a sustainable focus. We've had to bring that into the business, and you know, construction has always been and still remains to be very cost focused. And I'll be completely honest, when it comes to clients, some clients, if they've got an aspiration to achieve a low carbon rating of a building, when we start talking about the costs at this present time, the aspiration level drops. And we're looking at VE now. That aspect, it's a nicety, not a necessity at the moment. We do have some large scale clients that obviously have that focus and want to build into the net zero carbon aspect, and they have the monetary backing to be able to do that, but not everybody is in that position to do that, and that's probably one of the biggest challenges that we have. We have the experience, we have the knowledge, we have all the technical ability to be able to direct and signpost to the best carbon technologies, but cost is still very
Yeah,
significant.
but construction, it's the way it works. It's bottom
It
line
is.
every time, isn't it? For most, it's so unfortunate. Just on that point, how did you manage to get the knowledge though? You know, how does that come about? Because that doesn't sound easy.
It's mainly driven through supply chain. Our supply chain provide us with their technology knowledge. We
Right,
invite them
so you
in,
put
we
it all together.
engage with them. Yeah, we've got regular CPD sessions and training sessions to
Okay.
talk about their new technologies. We rely heavily on them. They're very experienced in terms of their technology and their manufacture, and we ask and we request that information from them because it helps us to feed that to the client as well.
Yeah.
So it's we're that person, that middle person that does
Anybody
that.
else on that subject? I mean, you may have got experience of that in practice.
I think some of the products it's very new, so we're not actually as an industry very good at, well, from a standpoint, measuring how much carbon we emit. Operationally, yes, but certainly embodied, not very much. So our Chartered Institute released a document on measuring embodied carbon of M&E services.
Yeah.
We just don't have very many environmental product declarations. So you go to a supplier, you don't know how much carbon is emitted by production of their materials and their products. So yeah, it's quite new. So if you buy a fridge freezer or a car, you'll know exactly how much energy is going to be used in running it. If you procure a 40-story office block, most consultants will be quite nervous about telling you how much energy you're going to use.
I sometimes think there could be work for auditors here. Yeah. You know, I can see a role coming, and I'm not sure whether the Big Four are looking at that, but I don't know if you know, but you know, this certification of what's on the label is true. You know,
well, it's from an operational perspective, it's increasing. So providing assurance of an organisation's greenhouse gas emissions, and particularly and the use of Scope 3. So when organisations are looking at supply chain emissions, that is increasing, and we are providing assurance over that, particularly for brands that are staking their reputation on achieving net carbon zero or being more sustainable and things like that. But there is still a question about the standards that are out there for reporting and different measurements and different frameworks and things like that. So that will come in time. I do think the sort of, for want of a better phrase, carbon literacy is one of the sort of key skills that's going to come alongside, and probably sit alongside the finance side of
it fits, doesn't it, in a way, in terms of numbers, cost, and then evaluation of it. I do see it as not as a marketplace, but I just see it as a function that will be required, that somebody will be asked to say, is that what they're saying correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And sort of verify that, because people are making promises about it and people are relying on those promises as well. So we'll see that in all organisations over time, people becoming more carbon literate.
Yeah. Do you see that?
Yeah, no, I mean,
you're in a line of business and you're quite...
Yeah, so I mean, we've done some carbon accounting for projects where we've done some sort of higher level assessment of the embodied, the operational life cycle of it, and it's something that the big sort of issue is going to be verifying that and making sure that the maths adds up and that there is due diligence behind it. And it's not just being able to pick the carbon factors. I mean, as you pointed out, we're using energy carbon factors that are from 2016. So it's about also being able to not just make sure that people are using the right sort of numbers, but then to actually interrogate the numbers behind it. And it's an audit.
So are people using your name and your skill set to actually verify what goes out in public documents or whatever?
Not just yet. I guess one of the assessments that we did was for the purposes of planning. So it was to support a planning application for a development to say this is what the carbon emissions, the net carbon emissions of the development are. So in a way, that was a kind of using us to actually assess that and verify it. But yeah, at the minute there's not really it's quite sort of piecemeal as to exactly what level.
Yeah, I think it's a good place to be in that marketplace. I think there's going to be more about work and more expertise required in that marketplace.
Well, at the moment it's voluntary, but there is talk within, yourself, Brendan, there's talk within audits, and the BEIS study recently about things like task force for climate related disclosures. In all those consultations was, do you use some form of non-financial assurance around the disclosures. And
Yeah.
I don't think we'll see that in the first iteration, but we will see it at some point.
I wonder if we're going to sort of, it might almost be, the issue might be forced a little bit. I mean, we also had the Dieselgate scandal a while back where somebody sort of got caught fixing the emissions, but it's, you look at the lack of sort of clarity in the
You can imagine that certain people want to bend it, you know, and or like turn a blind eye or not want, you know, bearing in mind we're back to construction costs, and you know, it's another industry that will always want to, or somebody will always want to get the lowest cost that they can, and therefore somebody that ships something in from wherever and it says that does the ticket. You know, I mean, we've had a lot of scams with the, you know, the building blocks of flats and the whatever, the right materials and the fire and all that. So the government are going to have to be a bit sharp to some of these practices. But I'm sure there's going to be some sort of certification coming to be able to say, you know, otherwise it's if you're a contractor and you're bidding for a job, you know what you're up against. If you can find a way to cut a corner, you will just do it naturally. It's part of you know, your in skill, you know, to look at ways to make it work because you've got a brief. So therefore, you know, that's where the problem will come back in, given the low margins you work on. So yeah. So working with supply chains, you've worked with some. Have you got any experience of working with supply chains and telling people what's required, or are you direct to market?
Yeah, mainly for us it's direct to market.
Yeah.
So you know, we have a network of installers and contractors and guys that work within our industry that we supply. For us with it, it's really about adopting the correct standards, making sure that the guys understand what the intent of being able to install insulation is, and that's to reduce the energy price of a property, and not just. The problem is insulation. If it's not fitted correctly, it doesn't work. You know, so a lot of people have this persona of, you know, let's just put insulation in. I've done it myself. We've got to be saving energy. But it doesn't work like that. So it's making sure that they're trained correctly, they're certified correctly, and as everything progresses, the technology within the installation industry grows. We roll out the information, like you were saying earlier about CPDs and stuff. You know, it's something that I'm very passionate about, and we do a lot of them. It's not the most exciting thing to talk about installation, but it's where you must start for energy saving.
So I was talking earlier about the government looking at, or maybe asking mortgage companies to be looking at EPC ratings on properties that are bought and sold in the marketplace, and maybe putting standards in place. So, you know, that could be a position that comes into play with your own position in terms of insulation and more understanding and use of it.
Definitely. I couldn't agree more. It goes back to the programs and the government and how they roll these things out. The government tend to have this thing about rolling an energy saving, you know.
Is that because they don't use people in the industry? They use boffins to come up with another budget or another formula and say we're chucking money at this, but we're not actually going to the industry to understand?
Yeah, Brendan, like the last one was the voucher scheme, the green vouchers. Yeah, and they rolled that out, but they rolled it out and they got a company in America to set it up. Like a company in America to do something for the government on the installation issues in the UK.
Yeah.
And then they wondered why it was a 12-month.
Yeah.
It was a 12-month program, and it was 6 months into that before even the first job got done.
Yeah.
And then they cut it short because, you know, the guys in America just went, you know what, we don't actually
know what to do.
But the problem is with that, and my major issue with that is that you have all of these guys, be it in insulation or, you know, whatever method, they put everything into getting their company ready and geared up for this, and they put time and effort into it. You know, they put the money into it. You know, and then it doesn't work.
Yes.
So you're doing the opposite to what that program was going to do.
that program did a lot of damage to the industry, didn't it? In terms of,
But everyone before that has as well. It's not,
Green Deal was exactly the
yeah,
same.
exactly the same. But it's not just the first Green Deal; it's the second one, the third one, and that makes it called something different, and still the same problem. And again, the major issue with that is the time and the effort and the money that's put into that. It works the opposite. Instead of saving energy and money for the consumer, it costs, you know, the guy trying to do that work is a homeowner. You know, so they're putting money in to do it, and then it costs money. So it works the other way. So I think we really need to address that, or the government need to address that the next time that they decide to roll something out that's meant to help the industry or the UK energy.
There'll just be a public reluctance, won't there, because of the experiences beforehand. So there'll be I don't want to know.
Yeah, exactly. And the more times they do it, exactly, the less and less it's gonna you know, hit what the targets that they need it to hit.
yeah, but there's got to be a carrot and stick here somewhere, isn't there? You know, I go back, go back, but you know, when they bought the paper, the plastic bag thing in, people started, when it cost it, people become aware of it, and somehow they've got to get people to think, you know, if your bills are going to go up, you can do something about it, or you know.
It needs to be simplified. That's what it needs.
You do say that for the man in the street.
Yeah.
That's
So I think councils have struggled to get people to take up insulation when it's free.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that's
quite sad, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Yeah.
Because there are schemes out there for free,
Yeah.
for free measures, and
Yeah.
I'll never go back over it again. It is a minefield.
Yeah. So how's construction going to look? I don't want to go 20 years, but 10 years. How's it going to look for you guys? You know, the M&E side of the business. What's going to be different? Are we all going to be computer based? And what's going to happen? Give me a
So I think long term, in terms of moving towards zero carbon, we need to move towards kind of a circular economy idea, because I think we're getting diminishing returns from construction and new build, and kind of the elephant in the room is our existing building stock.
Okay.
So moving towards more refurbishment.
The
I
refit
think will be a big thing, and kind of future-proofing our designs, so you get much more longevity out of the building rather than sort of knock it down and start again.
There's quite a sort of thing that actually knocking it down isn't the right thing to do, but some of these buildings are clearly not designed for the future.
Yeah.
So it's a, you know, a chicken and egg, isn't it? It's a little bit, somebody's got a clever design probably in the use of materials and whatever. Yeah.
I think it's using the products when you do that last forever, right? That we know that last, instead of looking at something and just thinking, okay, we've got this time frame for that building, and then we knock it down and do it again. You know, really, you know, look into more longevity use projects and products. So.
The problem with that is the ones we've got, like the brick and they are the ones that are tried and tested, because we know that they have that ability to be long term. It's the new technologies, they haven't got that tried and tested measure because they're new.
It's the chicken and the egg again.
But material development is ongoing all the time, and I think people can see what the value is, and if you can come up with a product that the market would want, you know, that's. I mean, there's all these. You go to these DIY exhibitions and you see these thermal bricks and made out of wool and all the rest of it, and then they tell you can build a block of flats with them and all the rest of it. You know, people are trying, aren't they, to find solutions to this problem.
They do come at cost, but I think people need to understand that they will come at a cost initially, but when the uptake begins and people start using them more regularly, the cost will drive down.
That's
so
another point.
It will drive down naturally, become the norm.
Yes, that does help the
phrase,
market.
the
The marketplace. So that's why the government need to give the stimulation to get the market going. I like to do with the electric bulk chargers and stuff like that. Get the motivation going, get it going, then people will buy into it, and the car manufacturers will put more effort into that, and you start to get
they'll hold more stock, it will be available, the cost will drive. At the moment, there's a reluctance to build a stock if they don't know people are going to uptake on it.
Yeah. But I mean, the car industry, I can see, is going through a revolution. I mean, there's no doubt about that, and that may help people a lot in getting to grips with, you know, the change in technology and carbon reduction as well. Okay, anybody got any thoughts? I was just going to ask generically, we've got a budget next week, you know, another budget, another nightmare coming, something else we've got to get some legislation around. they had the announcement yesterday with the net zero, strategy build green. Do you have any views on it? Has anything come out of that, Rich, that you thought might,
there's nothing concrete for you to talk about. From a construction perspective, it's the way it's set out is very much this is transport, this is buildings, and I guess one of the concerns is not just for sort of construction, but manufacturing and other sectors. There's not an industrial strategy type level narrative yet. I think that there is talk about carbon, there's taxation, there's talk about both incentives and the bit of stick. So in increasing legislation, which means the cost base might increase initially, but everybody's going to have to play to that increase in legislation. And it's interesting when you sort of talk about the car industry, before the investment, the legislation came first. So, reducing the 2035 to 2030, setting targets on how many naturally aspirated vehicles they're selling, etc., etc. And now we start to see them invest in EV network and the rest of the supply chain in certain sectors. So I think we may, whether they'll announce anything pre-COP, but I think, they're talking about research and development, they're talking about investments in skills, and that's a big thing, that we've maybe not touched on yet, but we might see something in terms of this is what we're going to do around skills investment. They recognise that there's potentially 440,000 low carbon jobs, and 20% of the workforce are going to need different skills. I wouldn't rule out a change in carbon, something like the climate change levy, but it might be stealth rather than avert this year. But over time, that's something, as I said, the UK ETS is a tool that they'll start to use to increase the price of carbon.
I can get the R&D coming in, that to improve that and get maybe more funding or more support. What about training? How would we get training more into
They've got something called the lifetime skill guarantee that they talk about in that document. It's a long document. I didn't get to the details of that yet, but again, it's about they're saying jobs for life with the right skills, the right investment, and a lot of retraining. I think that one of the issues we've got is, to Steve's point that he mentioned earlier, when people have invested in some of these skills and they've built businesses and then ultimately they've failed because the framework hasn't been built for a long time, it's been changed. And I've seen that 20 years in sustainability with a lot of the incentives have swapped and changed and moved around, and mid-cycle, which doesn't help anyone with certainty. So I think they recognise there's an issue for skills. It'd be interesting to see what industry collaborations they come up with and how successful it is.
Anybody got any tips for the budget, the Chancellor? Anybody like to other than reduce taxes and all the usual stuff? Anything that would incentivise your industry or get excited?
I think sometimes we've said a lot of negative things about it, but sometimes that's the feed-in tariffs. I think was quite a success story. So when they introduced that, there was a huge uptake in EV. Cost of panels came down quite quickly. So that was a quite successful scheme.
And then they withdrew it.
But that's contract driven.
To bring the cost of the panels down. That's
kind of the long-term goal of it. It's pretty successful in doing. So I think that, like I say, when you've got so many failed schemes out there, if they look at kind of ones that did work more successful,
it looks like they might point them at hydrogen.
They've got hydrogen now in there.
It looks like, I'm not saying entirety, but there's definitely a narrative within the document that says, yes, it's worked for.
But I see that as more commercial, heavy duty.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. My comment I said earlier, I like this a little bit more, what I call green capital allowances for expenditure that's actually focused, because capital allowances is going to get reduced come the end of this year, 31st of December. And that £1 million that's been available, it's not there anymore for companies. So something that's got green validity. I know it's how you define that, but I think there's some merit in that, because again, I think if there is incentives in that way, people don't like paying tax, and if they're going to build something or do something, maybe go green more if there's an incentive to do so. So we'll see if that gets any traction. Good. Well, we haven't really sorted the problems out, but we have had a discussion. I get the sense that I thought this paper, they needed to do this paper partly because of COP26. They probably had to put a footprint out to actually start talking about it, which obviously the press will. How long that will last for, and how but you know, I'm conscious that COP26 is next week, is what I believe.
Starts sort of something like the 5th or 6th of November.
Oh, it's a bit more. So the budget will come before COP. So he might then. Oh, I thought he might save up a few things. Oh, I've got timing's wrong. Yeah. Okay.
But he's starting to. It's imminent. So you know, he's they've released that plan early, so it may well be that we do see something in the budget, and then that gives him something they can talk about.
Goes to go to COP and say, I'm doing this, I'm doing that.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Good. Anything else on the subject of sustainability, carbon?
I think all I'd like to add is I think for the past few years they've done a very good job of building us all up and believing in what we need to do to help the planet in a green aspect. We're all on board. There's probably very few people that aren't. We need now some simple, easy, potentially low cost ideas now, and a strategy to how we can actually change it. We're all on board with it. We all believe, we all know it's the right thing to do. Now let's do it. But we need that system, clear, simple guidance to allow us to do so.
Very good point to finish on, I think. Thank you for that. Yeah, well done. Yeah, let me thank all of you for turning up and doing today. It was an experiment. I'm trying to do a panel and get an interaction, but I've enjoyed it. It has been recorded and it will be available once it's been put together. I haven't been able to deal with the questions and answers today. I apologise for time, but if there's anything there that we need to pick up, or can pick up, I'll get the panellists to respond. So thank you ever so much for you guys for turning up today and doing what you've done, and thank you for those that are still with us through this webinar. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you.